Dr. Greenleaf is a behavioral neuroscientist and a medical technology developer working at Stanford University. Dr. Greenleaf has designed and developed numerous clinical systems over the last 33 years, including products in the fields of surgical stimulation, 3D medical visualization, telerehabilitation, clinical informatics, clinical decision support, as well as products for behavioral medicine. He is currently a distinguished visiting scholar at Stanford University's Media X program, a visiting scholar at Stanford University's Virtual Human Interaction Lab, the Director of Technology Strategy at the University of Colorado National Mental Health Innovation Center, and a member of the Board of Directors for Brainstorm. As a medical technology developer, Dr. Greenleaf's focus has been on computer-supported clinical products, with a specific focus on virtual reality and digital health technology to treat PTSD, anxiety disorders, traumatic brain injury and stroke, addictions, autism, and other difficult problems in behavioral and physical medicine. In addition to his research at Stanford University, with Strategic Corporation Affairs to MindMaze, and Chief Science Advisor to Pear Therapeutics.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Well, I have a little bit of a spiel, and I hope there's perhaps time for questions and a bit of a dialogue too. How would you like to proceed?
Perfect. Yeah. Well, can you just start by, before you get started, telling me how you got involved in all this work? I just find it so fascinating.
Well, I guess when you live in Silicon Valley, you tend to get immersed in technology. I was a graduate student in neuroscience back in the 80s, and that was the time when virtual reality technologies first started going. I had a good friend, Jaron Lanier, who is credited with coining the phrase virtual reality and started the first commercial virtual reality company. And I saw some of the applications of this technology to my work in behavioral neuroscience. So that was the origin story of how I got involved in combining both technology with my interest in mental health and behavioral health. And it's been a fantastic journey since then. I'm so excited now to be here when technology is moving out from the universities, moving out from the teaching hospitals. Mm-hmm. And because of mobile technology, because of broadband and cell phone connecting technology, we're able to leverage technology to help in medicine and in particular for mental health. So for me, it's a very exciting time to see what my colleagues and I have been working on for decades, literally finally escaping the lab and getting out into more common use. We still have a lot more work to do to validate and to make it available to a larger group of people. But I think we're on the other side of a big barrier now, and I'm really excited about the big potentials.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a lot of the talks earlier have been, or there's been talk on the treatment gap, and the 50% of people are going without treatment. And, Shekhar Saxena from the World Health Organization has said, like, technologies are really what the potential of technologies to help solve issues where we don't have the trained professionals. So, yeah, it's the work you're doing. So, yeah, why don't you get into your talk and we'll learn more about it.
Okay, great. Well, and I should say that although I have a focus in this talk on virtual reality technology, it's part of a broader opportunity that comes from digital health, and I'll describe that point a little bit. I think the VR and AR technology and all the different immersive technologies are very powerful, especially in mental health, for ways I'll go into, but they're part of a broader spectrum of technology. All right, I should first mention that my academic center of gravity is both at Stanford University with the Virtual Human Interaction Lab and Stanford Healthcare. We have a clinic specific for virtual reality and psychology, psychiatry. But I also have a center of gravity with the National Mental Health Innovation Center at the University of Colorado, a group I'm very excited to be working with because they're pioneering the translation and extension of digital health technologies to mental health care. And I hope you have a chance to get to know them. I'm very excited to be working with them. One of the things that propels me to look at how technology can be applied to mental health care is because of arithmetic. I know by doing the simple math that we have a looming healthcare crisis involving an aging population. All we have to do is take a look at the ages of people who are alive now and do a little bit of calculations, and we can see that both on a US level and on a worldwide level, we're top heavy. There just simply are not going to be, in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, enough caregivers to support the aging population with a higher proportion of chronic disease, including depression, anxiety, and other happiness and health issues. It's going to be a challenge. As I mentioned earlier, I have been living in Silicon Valley for a while, so of course one of my approaches is that we have to address this crisis, and frankly the only way I see to really effectively do it is to leverage technology the right way. And fortunately, there are a lot of groups that are working on that. There's a digital health revolution, which is taking advantage of wearable sensors. It's leveraging the internet and mobile health technology. And it's probably most importantly, it's becoming a more patient-centered, individual-centered. Instead of going to a clinic, going to a physical spot at a particular appointment time to get help with your issues, we now can provide 24/7 access to guidance and help and coaching. And it has the patient at the center of care as opposed to the clinic being the center of care. Right now, as part of that digital health revolution, every medical device has been reinvented and moved from an analog world to a digital world. This allows us to do some amazing things. We now can leverage machine learning technology and mobile technology to come up with some very amazing patient-facing applications that can do better assessments, that can provide reminders and badges, connect people to have a social aspect to their health and wellness, and motivate people with leveraging some of the more interactive technologies. Meanwhile, at the other end of the curve, we have the dashboards that allow research scientists and clinicians and administrators to understand what's going on both an individual and a population basis. And in the middle, we have some really incredible analytics that are coming out that allow us to understand both the individual and also the population. What treatments are effective? How can we leverage a variety of interventions, leveraging biosensors and therapies that are not just pharmaceutical therapies to help with mental health issues, but cognitive behavioral therapy, counseling, other interventions, and see how they can work in combination together. So this is a very powerful tool that allows us to understand what's going on, what works, and probably most importantly, customize it for the user, for the individual. Part of this is what I'm excited about is how the technology I've been working on for many decades is part of this process, and how virtual reality technology, augmented reality technology can help in particular with mental health issues. As you probably know, and this is the point where I would ask my audience, how many of you have tried a virtual reality system? I'm going to assume, since lately when I ask this question, almost everybody raises their hand, that people are familiar with VR systems. Sometimes they've had a chance to try the high-end systems that are connected to a computer. Sometimes they've tried some of the low-end systems where a cell phone is put into is used as the method of deploying the VR technology. But by now, many people have had the chance to try this very powerful technology. And here's an important point. It's not coming from the pharmaceutical or the medical device manufacturers as something targeted for individuals. It's coming from the consumer electronics companies. So the technology is becoming very inexpensive because it's being produced at scale. And by the way, when I talk about VR technology, I use that as sort of my shorthand for the whole spectrum of immersive technologies, augmented reality technology, mixed reality technology, spatial computing, XR technology. To me, I just abbreviate them for the sake of this talk by saying VR technology and the spectrum of immersion. Sometimes we don't have to wear anything. We can step into a room that allows us to feel like we're connected to other people, that studies how we're moving, and allows us to have a three-dimensional interactive experience. Within the next 6 years, the projections are by people who study this that there will be more than 70 million users who have used VR. It will soon translate from just being something used for entertainment and gaming to something that's used for aspects of work, aspects of social getting along with each other. It's a very powerful technology, and the growth is staggering. Walmart, I believe, has worked with Striver to purchase, I think it's a large number, like 17,000 systems to use as part of their training system for employees in every Walmart store. I got involved, as I mentioned before, several decades ago. This is a picture of me in front of the Department of Physiology at Stanford when I was a youngster. Back in those days, the head-mounted displays were so heavy, we sometimes had to counterbalance them with a brick, and the computers were the size of a refrigerator. A VR system would cost more than $500,000. Now we can get something that's 100 times more comfortable and 1,000 times more powerful for $250. It's just amazing how the technology has evolved. Just as an example of, again, of how this has been very exciting for me, back in 2008, I went to China to see if I could help with some of the trauma after the earthquake, the Sichuan earthquake. I brought some VR systems to help train the clinicians and give the tools to the clinicians to work with some of the youngsters who had been in these buildings that had been poorly constructed and fell down. We weren't able to scale. The technology was just too expensive and unwieldy. Now, however, the group from Happiness went in to treat post-traumatic stress after the 2017 Mexico City earthquake. They were able to respond and help the day after the earthquake by using a cardboard-based VR system. Very impressive. Again, I should mention that my journey has been complemented by many fellow travelers, many research scientists who have built their careers upon exploring how VR technology can help in mental health. This is important to know because many people think the technology as applied to mental health has just come out recently. The reality is we've had decades of research studies showing us the pathway, showing us what works, what doesn't work. Now we need to revalidate these studies with larger numbers of users, and we need to validate it with current technologies, but we know the pathway. We have indications of where the value of the technology can be applied to help in mental health. Right now, there's more than 270 startups and more established companies working in medical VR and AR and in more than 20 clinical sectors. So why is everything translating now? Why is the opportunity here now when we've had the technology for decades? Well, until now, the technology has been uncomfortable to wear for extended periods of time. It's been bulky, and probably more importantly, it's been inaccessible because of its cost. But now we have very wonderful VR systems and AR systems that can leverage cell phone technology and be very affordable. So I'm going to try and pick up the pace a little bit here so that we have time to talk about this. But I do want to mention that it's the full stack of medicine that is being affected by this technology and empowered by this technology, starting at basically health and wellness and preventative medicine, but moving on to more objective assessments. Instead of asking people how they're doing or asking their family how a family member is doing, we can measure through use of VR and AR technology specific behaviors and use biomarker and wearable technology to complement those assessments. We can do more functional training. And in the field of mental health, this is really important because we need to make sure that we really understand how to have the right empathy and understanding the perspective of the people that we're working with. We can do improved mental health interventions, and I'll give some specific examples of that. We can leverage technology to make it engaging and thus facilitate adherence to a process that can help with the problem. And this is really important because VR technology can leverage the internet and can leverage inexpensive phone technology. We can reach outlying areas that have been underserved before. So just to Just to, again, be comprehensive, we see a lot of examples of how VR is being used as part of training, specific clinical skills and surgical skills, of course, but also interpersonal skill training, the soft skills of how to understand and to work with a person or work with a team. We can rehearse how to respond to an unusual event, an event that might happen infrequently, but you need to be prepared to help. And again, one of the things that I think is very powerful about VR technology is we can facilitate empathy. We can see the client or the patient or the user's point of view and understand what the experience is that they have from their point of view. And this is a very powerful tool. Okay, just to be comprehensive, we see a lot of examples of training how to do surgical procedures. We have virtual patients for that clinicians can practice how to work with a patient who might have a very difficult problem and rehearse how to handle a situation. And this doesn't mean that just an individual rehearsing with another individual. We can have whole teams practice how to respond to a situation together. And again, we can, and I'll give an example of this later in my talk, we can leverage the technology to show what it's like to be a patient in the care system. And of course, we'd all like to practice and be prepared of how to handle a difficult situation, such as giving news about a terminal illness, for example. We can practice and be prepared for different scenarios in advance. This is a picture of my colleague David Axelrod, who's using VR to train surgeons to do pediatric cardiac surgery. He trains people who worldwide in this procedure. But one of the things that David's done that I think is really important is he's used this technology to help better inform the patients and the patients' families of what the procedure they're about to go through. He is able to take something that might be very complex and by rendering it in a three-dimensional interactive way, make it a little bit more understandable. We can do better diagnostic assessments, including neuropsychological assessments, but also mood assessments in behavioral medicine. And we can do more sophisticated cognitive assessments. Again, we can, instead of using a traditional paper and pencil test, we can do a more robust evaluation using a simulated environment. One of the common scenarios, if you go to a research lab or go to a conference where people are showing a virtual reality system, is that they'll have you get into a virtual elevator and go to the top of a building and walk out on a plank. Now, the reason that many of these demos are provided to people and often traumatize people, unfortunately, I think it's not a good idea to just do this to people. But the point that is often attempted to be made by people putting people up on a high plank and having them walk out to try and rescue a kitten is that we can create a cognitive state using virtual reality. And once we can reproducibly create a cognitive state, in this case it was fear of heights, we can use that to help train people how to manage that cognitive state. We can give them the skills and give them the ability to practice in a controlled way how to manage their reactions to a particular stimulus. This, of course, can help with phobias. It can help with using exposure therapy to treat post-traumatic stress. It can also be used to help with addictions by teaching situational confidence and by allowing people to rehearse refusal skills. For a research viewpoint, especially in behavioral health, this gives us a very important tool to reproducibly create different moods. And again, we can create, using a virtual environment, a mood of happiness, a mood of joy, a mood of sadness, a mood of disgust, a mood of anger. And this allows us to both study what's going on and how to come up with effective interventions. One example of the power of this is the work by Lee Williams and her lab of taking this ability to reproducibly create a mood and study the effects on different interventions for depression to come up with a more personalized way of both evaluating someone who has depression and coming up with a personalized way of treating someone who has depression. So the technology now enables us to do that. The other thing that's going on with the development of this technology is it's being merged with some biosensor technology. In this case, there's several companies that are putting facial expression sensors into the head-mounted displays so we can give people feedback about their facial expressions, but also by combining that with other biomarkers such as heart rate variability, understand emotional responses to a stimulus and how people best respond to that. We have improved cognitive function tests where we do functional evaluation and look at cognitive aging. We also now have seen how the technology is being applied to help with health and wellness, to promote exercise, to promote weight management, to promote stress and mood management, to help as a disability solution, to address senior isolation, and to provide grief counseling. And again, I think this is a very important point. The technology allows us to reach underserved populations in a less effective and more cost-effective way. And it's not just the head-mounted displays and VR technology that's part of this. We also see that AI technology and virtual avatars combined with biosensors are giving us new tools both for training and also for intervention. And it's pretty amazing how well we've progressed with the ability to make an avatar that looks like and sounds like and has the right facial expressions to match an individual. Again, this gives us tools to help reach people who otherwise we couldn't reach in a more effective manner. So let me show a few examples. There's, of course, thousands of examples of how the technology is being applied, but I've chosen a few that I think are particularly important. Right now, there are clinics that are using VR for stroke and traumatic brain injury rehabilitation, both acute and post-acute. It's being used in part of physical therapy and occupational therapy training, and also both acute and chronic pain mitigation using VR technology. As you know, our mental health system is backed up. It can take months to get access to a specialist, if not years, and in some cases, specialists just aren't available at all. One of the things I found particularly exciting about the technology is that it allows us to address some underserved problems in a more effective, robust manner. There's a long list of where VR has been applied to mental health, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorder, depression, cognitive impairment, autism, attention deficit disorder, phobias, anger management, psychosis. There's a very, very long list of where the technology has been used, has been demonstrated to be effective, and again is now migrating out from the research lab into clinical care. Exposure-based therapy is one of the powerful tools that we use to address some of the anxiety disorders, but it's also part of other aspects of treatment. VR is being used part of palliative and hospice care. People can go on journeys with their families, go to places they've always wanted to go and haven't had a chance to. And it's a big, important part of addressing the problem with substance abuse and addictions by teaching refusal skills and situational confidence, helping people manage their cravings. One example of a project that we did at the Stanford Children's Hospital is Project Braveheart, where we started, and this was not very expensive to do at all. I hope more people look into doing this for their clinics. We captured 360 video of the patient journey, starting in the parking lot. And we captured and rotoscoped in images of patients who'd had the same journey previously to serve as guides. In this case, it was used for children who were scheduled for a cardiac procedure. These children and their families know weeks in advance what the most scariest day of their life is going to be, the day they show up at the hospital for a cardiac procedure. And they can practice and they can learn relaxation skills. We snuck in a few diaphragmatic breathing exercises and other games for them to play, to learn to get familiar. But more importantly, because they were able to get a tour of the hospital with a guide, they became familiar with what's going to happen and reduced the anticipatory anxiety of that very scary procedure for them. VR has been shown to be very effective at helping as an alternative to narcotics for pain distraction. And I probably won't have time to go into it, but there's a whole neuroscience of how VR promotes behavior change. It's one of the more powerful new tools we have to promote change. We can activate neuroplastic changes by making an engaging reward system. We can leverage mirror neuron systems to motivate people to change their behavior. Let me give an example of that. One example is how we've been able to age progress people using technology to come up with an avatar that looks and sounds like them, but represents their future self. And it's amazing how having a dialogue with your future self can prompt you to change your behavior, especially if it's dynamic. If you go into a bar, for example, even though you've made a pledge to your future self to change your behavior and cut back on your drinking, and your cell phone goes off and your future self calls you up and talks to you, and you see your future self, and he or she says, hey, I thought we talked about this. This is not a good thing for you to be doing right now. Same principles apply to weight management and other issues in behavior change. One of the reasons VR is such a motivating technology is we can leverage active involvement and narrative. Our brains are wired for narrative stories, and VR becomes a very powerful way to both see your behavior and be part of a story about yourself and your healthcare system. I should also mention that these technologies, VR and AR technology, don't exist in isolation. They can be used in combination with other therapies. For example, paratherapeutics is looking at how to combine VR and AR technology with digital health technology and prescription medicine. Equality is looking at building a platform that uses a in-ear stimulator of the vagus nerve through transcutaneous electrical stimulation, but they're not just looking to create a device that resides in the ear that changes heart rate variability and addresses the vagus nerve. They're building a digital health platform, and AR and VR will be part of the localization and customization of that. So again, to summarize, there's a big revolution on being powered by AI technology and machine learning and better analytics, but also with better motivation systems and better patient-facing applications. I'm excited about this because I think these new tools will help us address some of the problems I see coming in the next 20 years from the healthcare crisis of the aging population. And nicely enough, many of the things that VR and AR technology address also map to addressing some of the problems with an aging population. Acute and chronic pain, isolation and loneliness, neurorehabilitation, designing for disabilities, training of staff. The technology maps very well to the problems that are engendered by dealing with an aging population.
Wow, that is the best presentation I've seen on VR today. That was incredible.
Well, I skipped every third word. I hope we have a chance to go in greater detail later sometime.
Absolutely, no, it's much warranted. What incredible work you're doing in the space, and the depth and breadth of knowledge you have is pretty impressive. I wanted to just ask you quickly, do you know, I was happy to hear about the cardboard headsets. Do you know how those are working in comparison to real VR headsets? Well, not real, but you know.
Well, I think it's a transitional technology. I like the fact that we can reach people who have a smartphone, but now you can get a better system for $250, which is a lot less expensive than many smartphones. That's an all-in-one system. So I view mobile VR, as we call it, as something that can help us reach people who otherwise can't get it with a mobile VR system. But I think because of the fact that a all-in-one system is at a $250 price point, we'll see the mobile phones phase out and other things being phased in. Of course, for AR technology, being able to hold your tablet or your phone up and overlay that or have glasses, that'll be the way people go. And I think, frankly, that's going to be one of the major areas of helping with mental health, is not the fully immersive systems, but the spatial computing, mixed reality, and AR systems.
Amazing.
I have a question for Dr. Greenleaf.
Please.
Yeah, this is really fascinating, amazing. I'm a physician and I'm in healthcare, so I see the potential is just incredible. So I guess my question to you is, how available is this in regular healthcare settings? Is this out there already? Is this still, because this is, we need this now.
It's available. There's, in the field of mental health care, there are, I'd say, probably 50 startups that have developed the technology, some focusing on mindfulness, some focusing on pain distraction, others focusing on anxiety, a few focusing on depression, but they're out there. And there are networks that are being established to do combination therapy and get it out to the clinics. It's you have to look around for it, but there are validated systems out there. And a good resource might be to contact the National Mental Health Innovation Center at the University of Colorado. They're doing a lot of work both assessing and validating these systems. I would mention some of the names of the companies that are doing work in this area, except there's so many great companies and I would not have time to list them all. And I'd be worried about missing some important ones. And then outside of behavioral health, for stroke rehabilitation, for physical therapy, there's a lot of great systems out there.
Okay, great, thank you.
Wonderful. Just a final question before you head out. When you look, you've been working in the field for a while. When you look at the landscape, what's bringing you the most hope about the climate today, specifically as it relates to mental health and your work?
Oh, Catherine, it's like asking what my favorite book is. There's so many great things out there, or my favorite child. I'm excited about some of the difficult problems like helping with autism and Asperger's, helping with addictions, helping with depression. I think we have some new tools to help with some very difficult problems that will have a big impact. But I can't be any more specific than that. There's no one thing I'm most excited about.
Yeah, no, great. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time joining us today and sharing your work with the global audience, and really appreciate it for you joining.
Yeah. Happy to be part of this. Thanks for organizing this. It's an important event.
Absolutely, absolutely. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.